Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 26 mini series with the Los Angeles Angels. And for those of you who have been following us over the last several days, we are mercifully ready to start moving forward with the offseason today. A lot of discussion over the last several episodes since we won the World Series with the Worldwide Scouting Department. A lot of very interesting suggestions about what we should do, not just with this team, but also with this series more broadly. Talk about a few of those things at the top of this episode because I have gotten a lot of really interesting, useful, and thoughtful feedback, particularly in response to the recent episode that I want to talk through before we do begin moving forward. Normally, one person talking from the Worldwide Scouting Department isn't going to get me to completely change my view, completely change the course of the series, and that remains the case. But I do want to give a shout out for Scott Donovan, who had suggested moving on from the Angels at this point, maybe taking over another competitive team that could compete with these Angels and try to take the Angels down. And given that I don't have any particular allegiance to the Angels, and at this point we've made the playoffs 3 straight years, just won a World Series, and I'm not claiming that's an incredible accomplishment. We have the 10th highest budget in baseball. Angels kind of a train wreck when we took them over, but honestly, if you can either survive those Trout, Rendon, and Kikuchi contracts or trade them away proactively as we did over our first year with the Angels, then you've put yourself into a position where you can take advantage of being in a very big market with a very big payroll and turn the team around pretty quickly. We also were very fortunate that we hit on 3 straight first-round draft picks. Sean Gamble, Andres Rodriguez, and Jake Riley all really have become good to great players for us in a very short order, which certainly helped us boost the quickness with which we were able to get this team competitive. But Scott suggested taking on a new team, and I almost did it, and I was going to take it to a crazy level almost. I was going to take over the worst team in baseball, the Tampa Bay Rays, 67 and 95 a year ago, and they were 30 behind in the AL East. And when I looked at the Rays roster, not a great situation with their 3 longest and most expensive contracts. Shane McClanahan's still an excellent starter, but he's on the wrong side of 30, fragile physically, and making big money. Drew Rasmussen, as we talked about an episode or 2 ago, out for the next 7 months with a partially torn UCL, in his mid-30s, and set to be making a lot of money for the next 3 years. Brandon Lowe, also in his mid-30s, out for the next 6 months, so he'll miss spring training and likely the start of next season with a torn ACL. Basically an average-ish bat at this point, although, no, I'll be fair, he was 10% above average offensively in terms of his WRC+. Not a great fielder, and another guy who's making pretty significant money next year, and then a team option the year after. And then Junior Caminero, who's a guy that we've thought about trading for, younger, only 26 years old, but fragile physically already, and signed to a contract that, if he doesn't opt out, could be 6 years at high to very high costs. And then other than those 4 players with big contracts and some pretty significant age and or injury concerns, there's not much else on the roster. So I thought it would be a pretty good challenge So thanks again to Scott Donovan for that suggestion. Ultimately, I'm going to stick with the Angels. Two key reasons. One, I kind of said a few episodes ago that we were going to be sticking with the Angels, and I've gotten a lot of good feedback, as I noted, from the Worldwide Scouting Department on how to proceed, and I kind of want to keep that going. Second, though, we know this is going to be a mini-series that ends likely as soon as the next patch is dropped by the developers at OOTP, and I would think that would happen within the next week to two. So if I get into Tampa Bay, I'm likely only going to be playing them for 1 or 2 seasons. Probably will clear the decks, or would have cleared the decks on the roster, traded away who I could, suffered through a couple of very mediocre seasons, and probably about the time that we'll be moving on from this series would be just about the time that Tampa Bay would be getting interesting to me. And I think I'd almost be tempted to continue playing with them rather than beginning my long-term series. If this was a long-term series, I'd almost be more likely to pivot from the Angels to Tampa Bay and kind of see what I could really do with them over a period of time. But ultimately, we are going to stick with our Angels. We'll touch on Junior Caminero, though, because this is a guy that's gotten some feedback on potentially acquiring in a trade. Ian suggests yes. Peter Hooper and Avery Shayam suggested no. Ultimately, I'm going to end up in the no camp on him. I think he would definitely be a modest upgrade for us at third base, as we'll talk about shortly. I'd like to add another right-handed bat into the mix. But given that he's fragile physically, and given that he's going to be making some pretty significant money for the next 3 seasons at least, and possibly the next 6 seasons, I don't think he's such an upgrade over the guys that could be playing third base for us that it makes sense to bring him on board right now. Couple of other things that have been popular topics for discussion that I'd like to touch upon before we start making decisions and actually moving forward with this team. I've talked a lot about the fact that we'll likely be moving on from Zach Neto or Addison Barger this offseason. And most of the feedback I've gotten from Avery Shayam, and then a lot of back and forth on the subject from Undercover Boomer, was to keep Barger over Neto. And I definitely get the rationale there. Barger has been a really productive player for us since we picked him up in the early stages of this playthrough from Toronto. He had been a below-average offensive player for them, was in his mid-20s, and basically just looked like a slightly above replacement level third baseman who could stabilize the position for us. And instead, he's far outperformed my expectations over the 4 years he's been with us, putting up a 13.5 WAR over those 4 seasons. Now, he is almost 30 years old, and he's coming off of his worst year with us. A .237 batting average, was basically a league average offensive player. And when I look at his ratings, kind of concerned that's the best case scenario for what he's going to be going forward. But Barger has been more productive than Neto, set to make about $9.5 million next year, so he's going to be less expensive than Neto. So I get the rationale to keep him on board, particularly when we look at what Mr. Neto has done for us. Set to make $15 million this upcoming year, which admittedly is way too expensive for a guy that we envision as either a utility infielder or a part-time third baseman. But as I noted, we've got a big budget here with Los Angeles, so doing something like that is more palatable with these Angels to me than it would be with a team like we played with the A's a year ago in OOTP 25, who were very financially constrained. Neto, over the course of his career, has put up an 18.1 WAR with us, but admittedly he's got a couple other seasons in there. But you look at the average season from Neto over 162 games, and it's a 3 WAR. We compare that to an average season from Barger, and it's a 3 WAR as well. Different players, but ultimately we're getting similar things from them. What I like about Neto, talked about what I don't like, which is that he's more expensive, and I don't think he's quite a good hitter as Barger is, but he's a bit better defensively, and he's definitely better on the base paths. He actually led us with 20 stolen bases this year and led the league a couple of years ago for us. So he does give us some speed on the base paths that we don't have with a lot of other players. But as I think about this roster for next season, between our DHs and our outfield spots, Carlos Jorge, Anthony Scull, Andres Rodriguez, Kyle Tucker, 4 left-handed bats, Min Jae Kim, and Sean Gamble. Likely a catcher for Kim, but we do have him in the lab trying to learn a different position, and Gamble likely at second base. Give us 6 left-handed bats against right-handed pitching. Keeping Barger around gives us this lineup with 7 lefties most likely. But as I noted, Barger is going to be turning 30, coming off of his worst offensive season with us, and kind of looks like an average hitter even against right-handed pitching. So kind of wonder if it makes sense to bring him back as opposed to Neto. Now, Neto is a right-handed hitter, is certainly not exceptional against left-handed pitching, but he can also handle himself against right-handed pitching. But I do worry a bit about our lineup against lefties if we keep Barger on the team rather than Neto. We've got 2 huge right-handed bats in Vlad Guerrero Jr. and Yoshihiko Wakabayashi. Other than that, our right-handed bats are kind of replacement level platoon type guys. Juan Flores had a great year for us, but don't expect that again as a platoon guy. Talked about Neto, Josua Lugo, Anthony Volpe, Daz Cameron probably not going to be on the team next year. So what I ultimately decided to do is we are going to keep Neto since we can afford him, like the glove better, and he gives us a right-handed bat. And if we trade Barger away, we can get a guy who would certainly be the 3rd best right-handed bat on our team. Now, a steep drop-off from the likes of Wakabayashi and Guerrero, certainly. And interestingly, to bring this player on board, Neto actually has more trade value than Barger a little bit. We can get the team that we're going to be trading with to retain a bit more of his contract if we include Neto rather than Barger. But ultimately, want to keep Neto even though he's got, in theory, a little more value, because I think adding another legitimate right-handed hitter into our lineup, the argument being that Wakabayashi and Guerrero are really the only 2 legitimate right-handed bats that we've got, is something that I think can help push this team to hopefully be able to defend our title next year. So the question is who that right-handed batter will be. And there is a groundswell of support to reunite with Mike Trout from some members of the worldwide scouting department, notably undercover boomer Stanley Rosella, NS1 CLRK as well, noted that the extremely popular Trout would be a nice boost to our fan interest, which totally agree with. And Picking up Trout, we talked about this in the last episode. If we were to trade away the reliever Ben Joyce to the Orioles, they'd retain 90% of Trout's contract for next year. So it would cost us a little bit of money to have him on board, but wouldn't be crippling. I agree with those of you who have said that the storyline is great. It would let us come full circle in this story that we've been telling over the past several weeks in OOTP 26. But ultimately, I agree with Peter Hooper that I just don't think Trout is the answer at this point. And, well, it would be a nice story to bring him back. He's 38 years old. He's fragile physically. He brings nothing to the table defensively, even as a left fielder or right fielder right now. He'd be below average if we tried to put him into that role. And although he could be, I think, more than competent against left-handed pitching as a right-handed bat, there's a guy out there who, albeit being more expensive in terms of trade and in terms of the dollars that we're going to need to be paying for him, is in my mind enough of an upgrade over Trout that's the direction we're going to go with the first big trade, and honestly probably the only big trade that we're going to do this offseason. And the guy that we are ultimately going to trade for to become hopefully the third decent right-handed bat in our lineup, or more than decent right-handed bat, we're certainly hoping, although again I don't see him being at that Guerrero Jr. or Wakabayashi level, is Andy Pages from the Dodgers. Had some injury issues and has really become more of a platoon guy over the last 2 years. This past year hit .249, 16 homers, and a 1.4 WAR. Did put up a 123 WRC plus. The year before, 5 homers, 17 ribbies, hit just .245, 110 WRC plus, and barely above replacement level. But if we compare him to Trout, he's younger, he's healthier, he's better defensively, even though I don't think he's great defensively. He's set to make decent money these next couple of years, but the Dodgers will retain some of that. Unfortunately, not a ton of it, but some of it, which will certainly help us. Honestly, I talked about all of the big left-handed hitters that we have, and I think in a way we're kind of bringing Pages on as a very well compensated utility platoon guy who's going to be in the lineup in right field or left field or DH for us against left-handed batters 35, 40, 45 times a year as a starter. And then other than that, when I think about how good some of the left-handed bats we have are with Skull and Tucker and Rodriguez in the outfield, I guess the question is whether, if Jorge struggles again this year, that maybe gives Pages a path to get more steady playing time against right-handed pitching. But you look at what he can do against left-handed pitching, you look at his health, you look at his better defense, and although he's going to be more expensive in the money that we're paying, and he's going to be more expensive in terms of what we have to give up in trade to bring him on board compared to Trout, I think he's enough of an upgrade that's worth it to me. And I know what trade is going to work since I've spent a lot of time thinking about this offline. You can see to pick him up straight up, we actually could just get rid of Jorge, who I mentioned is a guy who was awful for us last year and could end up losing time to Pages. Lugo, another guy who we kind of envision as a backup, and then Gamble, Rodriguez, Wakabayashi, some of the top players on our team, and Koopman, who we think will be a top player for us next year. So not looking to give up any of them. We are going to trade away Ben Joyce, who's injured for next year, but could be pretty good value the year after that. And you can see that has some value to the Dodgers. Ultimately, though, we also want to use this transaction to move on from Barger or Neto. And as I mentioned, including Neto rather than Barger would actually ultimately have the Dodgers keeping an extra 15% of Page's contract. And I know that a lot of you are screaming at me right now that you much prefer keeping Barger to keeping Neto, but you don't have to agree with my thought process. But I think Barger's a little old. I know Barger's a little older than Neto. He's coming off of his worst year. He's about to turn 30. He's kind of always outperformed his ratings. And I'd rather keep the right-handed bat and the better defensive Neto around from Barger, even though it's more expensive. So including Barger in the deal still doesn't get it done. So we're sending pretty solid reliever, albeit one who's going to be out next year and then heading into the final season of his contract. Good solid third baseman in Barger. And then we've also got to include one more player to get this deal done. And the guy who we're ultimately going to include is a young pitching prospect, Francisco Hernandez. Like some things about him, he was a scouting discovery from 2.5 years ago. Like the high work ethic, like that he's potentially got pinpoint control, like that he's got enough stamina to start. Don't like that he's fragile physically, and don't like that we don't really think his stuff is ever going to truly be major league quality. And I don't know, with 40 stuff, even with average movement and outstanding control, I don't know if throwing in the low 90s really gets him to be a true impact player for us. Unless something's changed, they will retain 30% of Page's contract. So makes it a little more palatable this year, this upcoming season in 2030. I think 2031, if we're still playing then, which is very possible as it's only one season away and don't know exactly when that patch is coming about. 70% of 19 million, if we're really going to be using Pages as a platoon guy, is pretty expensive, but we'll worry about that a year from now. Right now, I think he gives us a good right-handed bat to get into the mix with the 4 other left-handed hitters in the outfield, and makes the team a little bit better. And as I noted, if I had included Neto rather than Barger in this deal, the Dodgers would have been willing to keep 45% of Page's contract. So the last time, I'll put that out there for those of you who really wanted me to keep Barger instead, to give you evidence to call me silly or other names. But ultimately, this was the decision I made, and we are going to go ahead and complete this trade and bring on the outfielder, Mr. Pages, who we hope will give us a third above average right-handed bat to go along with Wakabayashi and Guerrero. Fans not pleased that Barger is gone, and we did take a 1-point hit to fan interest by moving on from him. Few other decisions we'll be working on in the background over the next couple days as we get going forward. Probably won't get into all the nitty-gritty details unless we can come up with something great with Pages around and the other 4 kind of outfield DH slots that we have penciled in at this point. Daz Cameron, who was a platoon guy for us a year ago as a right-handed hitter, set to make about $3.5 million next year. We will look to see if we can get anything for him in trade. I'm guessing, I don't have to just talk about this stuff theoretically. I've still got 2 more shop attempts here. I don't think there's going to be great interest for him, but I can at least show you what the options are. And as you can see, we've got some not so good players. We've got some broken down, expensive players. Although Emmanuel Narciso looks like he's got, he must, I'm guessing his personality is going to be something that I find very objectionable. No, actually not. I mean, he's one of these guys, and this is part of the reason why I haven't started my long-term play yet, is that I'm seeing lots of guys who are like in their mid to late 20s in the game who we think, or at least my scout thinks, have tons of untapped potential, which is a little different from previous versions. You know, typically by the time you're in the mid to late 20s, the scouts pretty much know what you are, and they're not saying, hey, this guy's got below average stuff as a 25-year-old, but we think it could be absolutely incredible. And I mean, he is a 25-year-old who has pitched only 9 games above A-ball during his career, and he put up an ERA of close to 6 in AAA last year. That said, I don't want to be paying Daz Cameron $3.5-ish million next year. We don't likely have a role for him on the 26-man roster, and he's out of option years. I tend to think that Narciso is kind of a mirage, given that he's in his mid-20s, and 35 points of improvement in someone's stuff in the mid to late 20s would be pretty unprecedented. See what the OSA says about him, and they think he's got some capacity to improve. I don't care enough about Narciso to pull one of the guys that we've already got in our development lab spots out of it. If I was really going to make a full investment in him, would get him right into the development lab right now if we do trade for him, and get him working on improving one of his pitches. I'll spend a little more time looking at these options. I tend to think I'm just going to take the lottery ticket that is Narciso for him. Could pick up Drew Rasmussen, who we were just talking about. And the options weren't that exciting. We actually can get the Guardians to give us a lefty reliever in Joey Broughton. I don't see him really being that significant of an acquisition for us, but he's a guy who's got 1 option year left, so we can stash him in AAA. He's actually a lefty who's worse against left-handed batters than he is against right-handed batters, so was hoping he might be a way for us to feel even better about moving on from Gabe Spire, which we will likely do. I know this is something that I think Avery Shaham has talked about, and I agree with the assessment that Spire's basically replacement-ish level at this time, and we've got a team option for him at around $3.5 million next year. So he's actually the next guy that we're going to try to trade away. But I think Narciso is just a lottery ticket. Cameron, as we talked about when we picked him up last season, there are things to like about him. He's good defensively. He's got good speed. And he can definitely be a platoon guy against left-handed pitching, but we just don't have a spot for him. And I think $3.5 million-ish is too expensive. So we'll take a lefty who we've got control of for next year with Broughton in case we have some injuries, and we'll take a flyer on Narciso, who does still have 3 option years left. I don't think he's ultimately really going to be anything more than just a middle reliever, but there's some small chance that all of a sudden that slider and sinker will get developed really well, and it might work out to be a nice trade for us. So we'll go ahead and make that move as well. And with the money that was potentially set aside for Mr. Cameron, starting to have a little bit of money available. Obviously, if there's a huge international free agent, we're going to need to make a big trade. I would say that Kyle Tucker and Vlad Guerrero Jr. or Michael King, since I did bring him back against some recommendations from the Worldwide Scouting Department, would be the potential trade levers that we might try to press if there was an international free agent that we were incredibly excited about and needed to clear more money. Neto would certainly be in that bucket as well. But right now we're clearing up a little bit of money, although I don't expect we're going to be huge players in the free agent market. In as much money as we're clearing up by these, you can see we are way under the levels that we would like to be in terms of our scouting and player development budget. So we're actually going to start putting some of these savings into those budgets because we still want to be doing some pretty active scouting and working on our player development as this offseason begins. And with a $15 million scouting budget and a $30 million player development budget, both of which are significantly below where we had them a year ago, you can see that our financial flexibility for doing something interesting this offseason is very constrained. And I mentioned that option decision for $3.5 million for Gabe Spire. I'll have to buy him out for 10% of that if we move on from him. So since we're leaning towards just moving on, not expecting there to be a robust market for him, but there are guys that we could trade for him. A lot of expensive, broken down guys in their 30s making pretty significant money. In theory, I could bring on Joan Gonzalez, 31 years old, got an option year left, making the major league minimum, and then we could just waive and DFA him and save $350,000. But we're just going to decline the option and let Mr. Spire, who has been a good soldier for us over the years, explore free agency on his own. So with Cameron traded away and with the option declined on Mr. Spire, we do have 5 arbitration-eligible players we've made offers to. Still trying to bring back Cade Smith and Colin Snyder. I guess we can check in and see. I'm guessing Spire's probably not happy that we didn't make him an offer. He is looking for a lot less money than we had offered him. You wouldn't expect a 34-year-old to have any options left, and he doesn't at this point. I mean, I guess if you're a superstar, you might technically have options left at 34, but you're unlikely to accept a minor league assignment even if you have those options if you're a former superstar or a current superstar. But Spire, honestly, with the $1.5 million-ish that he's looking for now, if there was a way to potentially stash him in AAA, I'd consider bringing him on. Actually, at $1.5 million, I almost might keep him in the mix. But I don't think it's a decision we have to make right now. He might be a little more expensive when he hits the free agent market. I don't think there's going to be any big-time left-handed pitchers out there. But he's a guy we can keep as an insurance policy as far as a lefty. Right now we've got Riley as a lefty in the rotation, McDaniels and Koopman, who will definitely be in the bullpen, as lefties. And then if the season were to start today and we didn't do anything else, Selvage would be a lefty who would likely make the bullpen as a long reliever for us. So still potentially 4 left-handed arms in the mix for us next year without Spire. Would love to have another one in the mix in a perfect world, but would love it to be a guy who's better than Spire. So it may be something we look for in the free agent market, the international free agent market, or perhaps the trade market as we get closer to the winter meetings. And as we get ready to really start moving forward with the off-season through award season and get to the start of free agency, we did waive in DFA Grant McCray, who was our bridge center fielder briefly a few years ago on the way to Andres Rodriguez. Really didn't have any trade value, unfortunately. Good defensive center fielder with good speed. Hit 288 for us this last year in AAA, but he's almost 29 years old, no option years left. As I said, no trade value, largely driven by the fact that he's not really quite a major league hitter. So didn't want to be guaranteeing him $740,000 next year. We also waived and DFA'd the pitcher Josh Gross, who we picked up in a trade with the Yankees a couple years ago. Didn't want to guarantee him a contract next year unless we absolutely needed to. With Gross, we actually did say that if someone grabs him, we'll pull him back off of waivers because he's another one of those guys who's in his mid to late 20s and we think might have a little more potential to develop. As you can see, don't see him being a big-time player, but and there was not much of a trade market for him, so it's more just an insurance policy on our end to at least get another look if someone does put in a claim on him. So those moves potentially save us a little bit of more money. Hopefully we'll save a bit more as we get through the arbitration process. And as I said, I don't think we can be serious players in free agency this year unless we make a big move getting one of the big salaries for next year. I don't think it would be Wakabayashi, but if we could consider trading a Guerrero or a Tucker or a King or a Neto, those would be the kind of moves if we needed to open up some money as we get closer to free agency to, or actually as we get to free agency to do something interesting. But right now, that's more of a theoretical exercise than something we know we're going to be doing. And although there was no trade market for McCray other than a handful of very old, injury-prone, and highly paid players, both the Cardinals and the Tigers put in claims on him, so he will be moving on to somebody else. And we're starting to get some players signed. Colin Snyder, arbitration-eligible Christian Scott, Garrett McDaniels, Carlos Espinoza, Carlos Jorge, who, despite the fact that he was brutal for us, the fans are actually happy to have back. McCray has gone to Detroit. We do have a hitting coach to fill the one opening that we had in our organization, so making little bits of progress there, back to the 98 fan interest, although my expectation is with the likes of Logan Gilbert and Austin Wells, who were rentals, definitely leaving us this offseason, probably will be facing a little bit more of a decline in that number, unfortunately, over the coming weeks and months. Not inconceivable that maybe the fans will be a little happy we brought Schwellenbach back. While we're talking about Schwellenbach, I meant to do this earlier. I did spend a little time offline looking at the transactions history and our decision history, and I thought about this when we were moving on from Barger, because Barger, although as we talked about earlier and we've now traded him away, was a guy that we thought would just kind of be a guy at third base, and he's ended up being better than a guy for us at pretty decent money. That's the best trade we've ever made. Taylor Ward and Mickey Moniak picked up almost a 13 WAR in that deal. Picked up a 9 WAR in the deal when we took the gamble on Christian Scott, who was out for the year with the Mets. Didn't look like he had incredible stuff, but he's still become a useful pitcher for us, and we got Moncada off of our books quickly. Those were the two best trades we made. The worst trade we made, some of you may remember this, Matt Wallner, who we brought on when we've been going back and forth with that corner outfield DH role, struggling with it every year. Traded away Nolan, who hasn't done too much since we left him, and is actually now back with in the AL West with Houston after the Yankees moved on from him. Walbert Urena, who was a pretty solid pitcher last year for Texas. And then we also traded away Felix Morabel, who looks like he is a pretty interesting defensive shortstop with some speed. Not sure how much he's ultimately going to hit, but he did hit 251 last year for the Yankees, so that's been a bad trade for us. But I did also notice, though, when I think about the big trades that we've done, and that's why I came back here when we touched on Schwellenbach. Our original trade, when we picked up Adley Rutschman, who put up a 7.5 WAR for us, and traded away Mike Trout, who's put up an 8.1 WAR for the Orioles. Kind of a push, although to be fair, Trout's had more seasons with the Orioles than Rutschman's had with us. But it was just kind of interesting to see that some of the key people in these big trades that we've made, the wars were kind of interesting because we ultimately did trade Rutschman away to bring on Schwellenbach. Schwellenbach's put up a 9.8 WAR for us. Rutschman's put up an 8.6 WAR for the Braves. So, like the best trade that we've done is bringing Barger on board. The big trades that we made, getting rid of Trout, bringing on Rutschman, then getting rid of Rutschman, bringing on Schwellenbach. Those are both nowhere to be seen, so they're somewhere in the middle between the best trades that we've made and the worst trades that we've made over the course of this playthrough. Clearly the best acquisition we've made, period, was the Andres Rodriguez draft pick, 6th overall, and he's put up a couple of monster seasons for us. Rookie of the Year a year ago. Would think that he's going to be in the mix to potentially win a Silver Slugger this year, maybe get some votes for a Gold Glove. Don't think he's going to be the MVP, though, this year because of the monster season that the Texas Rangers third baseman Sebastian Walcott had, where he led the league in many of the key offensive categories. And as we get into awards season, Schwellenbach and Cade Smith both signed their contracts. We also continue to sign some of our minor leaguers to extensions. Unfortunately, no impact as far as our fan interest, so that will likely be regressing a bit even after we had this excellent season when we lose some of those guys that we talked about earlier. And although no Gold Gloves, no Mariano Rivera Award, we do have 3 Silver Sluggers. I don't think the winners are going to surprise anybody who followed us. Yoshihiko Wakabayashi had a monster year, likely will be the AL Rookie of the Year, although he's a veteran rookie of 29 years old who had a outstanding career in Japan before he came over to play in the majors, but led the league in walks, led the league in on-base percentage while hitting .319 with a 141 WRC+. Not a surprise to see Swaney as the Silver Slugger at shortstop. As we touched upon, we thought that Andres Rodriguez would likely win a second consecutive Silver Slugger in center field after leading the league in ribbies, which he did. And then Kyle Tucker in right field, who had the best year of his 4 going on to 5 years in Los Angeles with us, won the second Silver Slugger of his career, first in 6 seasons for Mr. Tucker. And in the least surprising news out there, Wakabayashi won the AL Rookie of the Year. Interesting that... Sorry for getting distracted there by a phone call, but Wakabayashi, the Rookie of the Year. Interestingly, our other international import, Min Jae Kim, got the other 3 first-place votes. Anthony Scull and Sean Gamble also got some support. A guy who we think would have gotten some good support if he hadn't gotten hurt, Jake Riley, ended up getting no votes. Does seem like the Rookie of the Year voting in OOTP, at least in recent years, has been a a bit difficult for pitchers to get a lot of attention, but certainly a good trend for our team when there were 7 players who got Rookie of the Year votes, and 4 of them were on our squad. And another very unsurprising result, Jan Rivera win the World Series. You have the best record in baseball for a second straight year. Probably going to get some attention for Manager of the Year, and Rivera now 2 for 2 making the playoffs, and has a World Series title already in addition to winning Manager of the Year this season. And the 2 big awards have now been selected. Not surprisingly, we did not have winners of either of those. In the National League, Andrew Painter is your Cy Young Award winner. 11-8 record for the Phillies, but led the league in strikeouts, earned run average, strikeouts per 9, and pitcher WAR. Over here in the American League, Garrett Crochet does get another Cy Young Award, a 4th consecutive Cy Young Award, but it was for Houston after Boston let him move on this past offseason. 11 wins also, 11-9 record, but led the league in games started, innings pitched, strikeouts per 9, FIP minus, and pitcher WAR, while also putting up a 2.49 ERA. So 4 consecutive Cy Young Awards for Crochet. Michael King, despite the injuries, he missed half the year for us, but the 10-3 record with the 2.06 ERA before he was done for the year allowed him to finish 6th in the voting. You'll remember from the last episode that we decided to exercise our team option to bring him back for $17 million next year. Given his age and fragility, that was not necessarily the most popular decision with all members of the worldwide scouting department. National League MVP, Michael Harris II, Acuna Jr., and Ellie De La Cruz also got first place votes, but Michael Harris II led the National League with a .321 batting average, 47 doubles, .604 slugging percentage, .973 OPS, and a 6.9 WAR at the age of 21. And no surprise in the American League, as we expected, Sebastian Walcott, your unanimous MVP after a monster season, leading the league in many key offensive categories. Andres Rodriguez was your unanimous second place finisher. Kyle Tucker finished 3rd. Some other members of our Angels who got votes include Wakabayashi, your Rookie of the Year. Carlos Jorge, that's driven by what he did with the White Sox, obviously, since he was a total disaster after we brought him on board. And then Min Jae Kim, the international outfielder. And Jake Riley, who we talked about, thought if he had stayed healthy, could have been a strong Rookie of the Year candidate after he went 8-2 with a 2.65 ERA after his first 19 starts. Now healthy, so we moved him back onto the roster, as we talked about last episode. With him being healthy, we envision moving him into a longer-term program after Min Jae Kim completes this Learn New Position program, which is not going particularly well in the early going. And we did actually get our mid-semester report card on Min Jae Kim. As we noted, he's frustrated, trying to work at first base, doesn't seem to be suitable to his current skill set. Not looking likely that he's going to get to an acceptable level defensively. We're not going to cancel the program, though. Still interested in seeing, even with a weak result in the development lab, what type of capability at first he might come out with. Is he going to come out with just first base, not listed as a position at all? Or will it be listed at 20 out of 40 in terms of his potential ability there? Rating's not incredible, is 6'1", might as well find out what it looks like to go through the program with a guy who's closing in on 34 years old. Maybe the old adage, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, is accurate as far as a position switch in the mid-30s. And we're heading into getting ready for the free agency filings. Last chance to check in on Joan Duran. Still looking for $20 million a year over 3 years. I think it's very conceivable he'd accept the qualifying offer if we made it to him. And given the constraints we're under financially at this point, and the fact that we'd like to continue with the somewhat higher investments in scouting and player development we've made as we've kind of moved through the early stages of the offseason, not inclined to take a risk that he'll accept our offer. So we're likely to let him hit the free agent market for no compensation. And again, if there's a really interesting international free agent out there, maybe we'll get active in the trade market again. And we have made it to the start of free agency, which will mean the end of this episode. Definitely a lot of pitchers out there. Catcher Bo Naylor, which we don't really need. Cole Reagans as a starter. Manuel Clase out of the bullpen. Tanner Houck, Devin Williams, outfielder, and C.J. Abrams. Jacob deGrom, Mason Miller, Tyler Glasnow, and Nestor Cortez. As we looked at a couple of episodes back, most of these guys are going to be relatively expensive for what they are, or at least that was our belief, which is part of the reason we brought King back. Before we see exactly what they're looking for, though, we'll take a quick look at whether there's any very interesting international free agents for us to consider. You can see there are a lot of pitchers out there. Only one of them's a lefty, though. Right fielder Midori Hirose. Pretty interesting left-handed hitting outfielder. Again, that's kind of a strength of our team right now, but certainly wouldn't mind getting to know more about random Hirose, but don't think at $23 million he's the path that we should go, given that he is 33 years old. First baseman Bo Zhang Zhu out of Taipei. Really good contact hitter, potentially. Only 22 years old. Looks like the Twins have already signed him. Getting into the pitchers now. Closer Katsumi Chatty Fuji. Looks like pretty good stuff, pretty good movement. Don't love the lack of control. Does hit triple digits on the gun. But looking for 14 million-ish. Don't know that that's really an answer for us. 26-year-old starter Ziyang Tan, also out of Taipei. Not all that exciting. And the lefty starting pitcher Hyun Chul Myung. Not that exciting either. So seems clearly that Hirose is the most interesting of the international free agents. Don't know that he's someone we're going to pursue all that actively, since we don't have a ton of money to spend, and we've largely going to be bringing back the team that won it all last year, with the key subtractions likely being the rentals, Austin Wells and Logan Gilbert. Quick look at the free agent class. As we noted, Abrams and Hirose, some of the highest regarded players. Wells looking for over $20 million a year. Garcia Jr. and Bo Naylor also in the 15 to 20 million area when all is said and done. Technically, with the fact that we do have the expensive Neto penciled in as a third base / utility infielder type, along with Lugo and Volpe, and we added Pages to the outfield room. If we don't have any injuries, we kind of know who our position players are for next season. So I don't think we necessarily need to change too much of anything or chase anybody. our old buddy Logan O'Hoppe and Nolan out there as well. Taking a look at the pitchers who are available, this portion of the class is definitely richer in a bit than the position players. But as I noted, expected most of these guys to be looking for pretty significant money for what they are. Our buddy Logan Gilbert, highest on the list, looking for around $35 million a year. Duran says he's only looking for $12.6 million now, so he definitely would have accepted that $20 million qualifying offer. His demand has come down very significantly. 1 year, $12.6 million. You know, that's the type of contract that might make us willing to lower scouting and player development a bit. Don't necessarily see any huge impact guys. Brian Abreu, righty with really good stuff. $5.5 million. We could probably put him into the mix in the bullpen as well. So a lot of interesting things for us to consider. But as I've kind of talked about, I don't think we're ultimately going to be huge players in free agency this year, but we're largely bringing back the guys that we wanted to. We've added Pages into the mix and feeling pretty comfortable about the roster that we have as we get closer to the beginning of the free agent period. And with that, we'll call it an episode. I'll spend some time between now and the next episode offline exploring whether there might be anything interesting to do in free agency, but my gut is we're probably going to be pretty patient as we like the way this roster looks, and pretty confident that we can be a very competitive team again in 2030. Until our next episode, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.